I feel like it.
How is he?
Jennifer's suing us for wrongful death.
And I'm sentencing you to the middle term of 4 years.
Inside a high-security prison, a man covered in tattoos sits alone in a tiny, cold cell. His name is Jacob Harlow, and he's scribbling a letter to his son, the first contact he's made in 6 years. Today's the day he finally walks free. Nothing, not even the discovery of a prisoner hanging in a nearby cell, can stop his release. With a bit of cash and a temporary license in hand, he heads straight for the train station to begin a long journey to whatever comes next. At his destination, he's greeted by two familiar faces, Frank and Howie, mob guys who seem eager to help. They provide a car, and Jacob wastes no time settling in.
Fuck, let's go eat, man. Whatever you want.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, two cops are dealing with a tense situation. One of them, Ward, has taken a man hostage in his own home. His partner, Catcher, knocks on the door, but instead of a response, a shotgun blast slams into his chest. Luckily, his vest saves him. A child's terrified scream erupts from inside. Without hesitation, Catcher kicks down the door and shoots the sick bastard responsible. Back with Jacob, he's led into a house that's alive with chaos. Ex-cons, booze, loud music, and girls. It's a gangster's welcome home party. Frank, eager to please him, offers him whatever he wants. When Jacob steps into the bathroom, he returns to find a naked girl sprawled out on his bed. He's not interested. Without a second thought, he kicks her out and heads back downstairs. He needs a car, but before he can get into details, something catches his eye. A gunman outside. Jacob dives to the floor, pulling Frank with him. Bullets rip through the walls, hitting the girl he just kicked out. There's no time to react. They have to run. Jacob is thrown into a car and driven away. The driver, a regular guy named Howie, isn't tied to any gang.
You're answering only to me now. You don't.
His clean record makes him useful. Jacob takes his car and offers Howie a job as his driver. The deal is simple. Get two untraceable phones and meet him at the motel tomorrow at 10 a.m. A decade earlier, Jacob was living a completely different life. He was a successful stockbroker with a beautiful home, a loving wife, and a son who adored him. One evening, after a dinner party with friends, he made a fatal mistake. He got behind the wheel drunk. He ran a red light. The crash killed his friend in the back seat.
I need the light! What?
Everything unraveled from there. Meanwhile, Catcher is investigating the city's biggest crime boss, a guy called Beast, who somehow runs everything from behind bars.
The rest of your life.
Look, it's hard, Kutcher. It's hard.
There's a major weapons deal coming up, and Beast has appointed Jacob as his go-to guy. Catcher knows Jacob just got out, so he's making a plan to turn him against Beast.
The Mexicans in the next 48 hours. He's ordered this.
Flashing back again, we see Jacob's trial. His lawyer lays it out bluntly. The evidence against him is overwhelming. His only chance is a plea deal, 16 months in prison instead of a possible 7-year sentence. With no other choice, Jacob takes the deal. Fast forward to the present. At the motel the next morning, Howie is already waiting, just as promised, with the two new phones.
Raise it from this one so it's clean.
Jacob makes sure they're clean, hops in the car, and heads to the location Beast gave him. There, he meets up with another ex-cellmate, Herman, to finalize details for the weapons trade.
I asked the Beast for you to handle this?
Jumping back again, we see Jacob arriving in prison for the first time. His lawyer had warned him. If he didn't establish himself from day one, he'd be easy prey. That night, as the guards disappear and the real prison life begins, Jacob watches in horror as a new inmate is brutally attacked. Determined to avoid the same fate, Jacob keeps his head down, but it doesn't last long. A random bump into another inmate escalates quickly. With the whole yard watching, he remembers his lawyer's advice: strike first or suffer later. He throws the first punch, and the guards only manage to stop the fight by blasting them with tear gas. The result? A few days in solitary, but it earns him some respect. Back to the present, Catcher interrogates Jacob about the shootout at the party, but there's no solid proof linking him to anything. He has no choice but to let him go. Returning to Jacob's time in prison, we see him stepping back into the yard after solitary. Frank introduces him to the gang's leader, who offers protection for a price. Jacob's first job? Smuggle drugs. The process is degrading, but it's a test he has to pass. He does what needs to be done and keeps himself useful. Later that night, Jacob meets up with the crew. He lays out the plan. Coordinates for the weapons deal will come through an hour before the exchange.
Yeah, it's good.
Frank seems jittery, which makes Jacob suspicious. After leaving, he decides to follow Frank and soon spots a meeting with Catcher.
I've done everything you asked me to do.
Turns out, the cop is blackmailing Frank for info about the deal. Since there's no real intel yet, they decide to plant a tracker on Frank's phone to get the location when the time comes.
Fucking trafficking charges up to DEA.
Flashing back again, we see the moment Jacob truly lost himself. He's ordered to kill another inmate. His hands shake, his stomach churns, but in this world, it's kill or be killed.
All right, before he hits the chair.
With no way out, he follows through. From that moment, he's no longer the man he once was. Back in the present, Jacob gets an unexpected visit at the motel. His wife and now-grown son. His son begs him to come back to his old life, but Jacob knows better. There's no going back. Not wanting to drag his son into his mess, he shuts the door in his face. Tears threaten to break through, but he holds them back. From the window, he watches his son leave. As the police keep watch outside, Jacob silently slips out the back, vanishing into the night. Watching from a Jeep across the street, Jacob keeps an eye on the situation. He heads to a nearby cafe where Howie is waiting. After a bit of small talk, Jacob asks how Howie first got involved with Frank.
Breakdown?
No. We'll pick it up tomorrow.
Then, without wasting time, he demands Frank's address, telling Howie he'll pick him up personally before the big deal goes down. Flashback again. Inside the prison, tensions are high. There's no way to avoid the chaos brewing. A major fight is about to erupt, and Jacob's cellmate warns him to stick close to the center of their gang to avoid getting taken out. When the riot finally breaks out in the prison yard, shivs flash in the air as one gang ambushes another. In the heat of it, Jacob saves the Latino gang leader, Herman, by taking down a massive guy charging at him. But then, he spots a security camera. The whole thing is caught on tape. Later, at his trial, his worst fears come true. An extra 9 years gets slapped onto his sentence. As his wife breaks down in court, Jacob yells at her to move on and forget he ever existed. Now in a maximum security facility, Jacob is assigned a new cellmate, the Butcher, who greets him with a mix of respect and curiosity. In this prison, exercise time is different. He's locked in a cage within the yard instead of roaming freely. During one of these sessions, Jacob meets the prison's top dog, who's already heard stories about him. Just like Beast, this guy is intrigued. Not long after, Jacob gets divorce papers from his wife. It stings, but deep down he understands. She has to move forward with her life. On another yard walk, Jacob finally meets Beast in person. The guy has taken out a guard and now rules death row. He tells Jacob he's got no choice. He has to stay in line, or his wife and son will face consequences. It doesn't matter that Jacob has done 10 years. If he slips up, he's coming right back. Back in the present, Jacob pieces things together. The shootout that injured the girl? It was Herman's doing, with Frank feeding him intel. Without hesitation, Jacob tracks Frank down and takes him out. Meanwhile, Catcher, the cop, starts getting worried. His informant hasn't checked in. He heads to Frank's place, only to find the guy dead. Realizing things are spiraling, Catcher calls his partner, who's been monitoring Jacob's phone. They break into Jacob's motel room, but he's already gone. However, there's one lead left, Frank's phone. Someone still thinks Frank is alive and will send the deal's coordinates at 11 o'clock. What they don't realize, that someone is Jacob himself. Jacob and his team are already loading up the truck with weapons. Meanwhile, Catcher and his task force are scrambling. Their only clue is the coordinates they're waiting on. At 10:54, Jacob, sitting in the weapon-loaded truck, powers up his phone, fully aware the cops will track him instantly. At exactly 11 o'clock, the location comes through. He quickly shows it to Howie, then secretly forwards it to Frank's phone so the cops can see it too. As the task force races to the site, Jacob makes a move. He pulls a gun on Howie and forces him to confess. Turns out, there's another hidden stash of weapons that only Frank knew about. Jacob tells him to forget the stash and disappear. Then, he orders Howie to jump from the moving truck and takes over driving. Tossing his phone out the window, he heads to the meeting point where Herman and his crew are already waiting. Herman has no clue that Jacob knows everything. Jacob proposes a new deal. Keep the transaction going, but they'll split the remaining weapons. Herman, thinking he's still in control, agrees. But just as the deal starts, Catcher and his team storm in, arresting everyone. Later, Jacob sits alone in a prison cell. Catcher gives him an ultimatum: snitch or spend the rest of his days in solitary. But Jacob isn't about to talk. He won't betray Beast, and he knows the second the inmates find out he killed Frank, he's a dead man anyway. He also doesn't trust Catcher to let him walk free, even if he did talk. So he stays silent. A guard takes Jacob out for a walk, placing him in a caged area. Across from him, locked up in another cage, is Beast. The guy is furious. He knows Jacob was the one who set up the cops with the deal coordinates. Beast starts making threats, promising to go after Jacob's wife and kid. But what he doesn't know is that Jacob has a plan. Using a hidden key, Jacob silently unlocks his handcuffs. Then, with a razor blade pressed against the guard's throat, he locks him inside the cage and steps into Beast's. Only now does Beast realize the mistake he made. Threatening Jacob's family was the wrong move. The fight is brutal, but it ends with Beast bleeding out on the floor, throat slashed. Jacob rises, locking eyes with the stunned guard. He gives him a simple choice: keep things running as usual and continue getting paid, or report what happened and deal with the consequences. The guard makes the smart decision. Later, Catcher receives a message with the location of the second weapon stash. He doesn't fully understand Jacob's motives, but he's starting to respect him. Sometime later, Jacob receives a letter from his son. In it, his son forgives him. And for Jacob, the new boss of both the prison and the city, nothing else matters more. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you didn't, feel free to hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. For the full experience, you should definitely watch the movie yourself. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.